Chapter 5 illustrates the effect of Santiago's death on many characters, suggesting that the guilt was communally shared. However, solitude may be a stronger force in the novel because everyone had their own reasons to why they were not able to warn Santiago Nazar. Hence, Santiago is isolated from his surrounding society as they behave to overlook the murder. Since they were all able to prevent Santiago's death, Marquez suggests that characters become obsessive over the things that they could have done, thus their guilt caused them to suffer physically and mentally.
Among the characters, Placida Linero doesn't regret her locking up the door that prevented Santiago from escaping the twins' murder, but she rather regrets herself for misinterpreting Santiago's dream.
I locked it because Davina's floor had sworn to me that she'd seen my son come in, and it wasn't true. But why did I mix the magnificent augury of trees with the unlucky one of birds?
Her greater regret towards misinterpretation of the dream over her physical actions suggests that, to Linero, the illusionary foreshadow overweighs the physical event of the murder. This shows the author's use of magical realism, in which Placida Linero's belief in dream clouds her understanding of the real cause of the murder. By using the magical realism, Marquez creates dissonance between the illusionary elements of dream and non-fictional dissection of the realistic murder case that suggests the absurdity of Santiago's death.
On page 100, the investigator came to check out the crime. He wrote, "Give me a prejudice and I will move the world." This is a reference to Archimedes' famous quote, "Give me a place to stand on and I will move the earth," which expresses the idea that anything is possible if a certain tool is used. In a society in which sex is strictly prohibited for women before marriage, people believe that anything can happen to Santiago Nazar, a man with an Arabian background. Thus, prejudice can be created in a traditional society, which further supports people's reason to Santiago Nazar's inevitable death. In a way, the characters are making their own story because prejudice is based on personal experiences and culture. Only those characters are able to understand their own justifications. As a result, the justifications are ambiguous depending on the audience, which reflects the book's uncertainty.
The narrative turns back to the future, when the narrator talks about the investigating magistrate who looked for a single person, but he could not find anyone who saw Santiago go into Flora's house. With an element of magical realism, the magistrate pronounces in red ink the quote, "Fatality makes us invincible," page 113. There's a strong connection to the beginning of the chapter on page 97.
He's armed with a magnum that can go through an engine block.
That man can't shoot.
Those who could have done something to prevent the crime and did not console themselves with the pretext that affairs of honor are sacred monopolies, giving access only to those who are part of the drama. The phrase "fatality makes us invisible" in connection to this quote implies that nobody wants to interfere with the honor killing and what they believe is to be fate because the problem does not surround them personally.
I need to check this for a second.
Do you guys know where Santiago is?
Here you are. I hope they kill you.
Open the door!
Did you know they're gonna kill you?
¿Qué?
It's either you go home or get a rifle.
Dios mío. I'm going to go home now.
Santiago Nazar left. The people had stationed themselves on the square the way they did on parade days. Page 115.
Santiago, where are you going?
Santiago, go right. Go to
What
the
are you
right.
doing?
Santiago, spin.
What are you doing? Come left.
Go front.
The sudden shift in atmosphere from Miguel's quiet household to a crowded area illustrates the physical image of Santiago's confusion. The chaotic atmosphere represents Santiago, as in the previous page, Santiago was described as perplexed, page 113, and that his manner reflected not so much fear as confusion, page 114.
In the murdering scene of Santiago, the description of Pedro Vicaro's knife going through the palm of Santiago Nazar's right hand on page 117, and the scene of Santiago Nazar not falling because the twins themselves were holding him up with stabs against the door on page 119 alludes to the crucifixion of Jesus, which also references to the previous chapter when the report stated that Santiago looked like a stigma of crucified Jesus on page 75. This reinforces Christ figure connection of Santiago, re-emphasizing Santiago as an innocent sacrifice of society's lack of responsibility.
And then...
Marquez uses biblical allusions as well. Santiago Nazar's confusion after he found out that he's going to be killed marks him with innocence, establishing a connection to a Christ figure. Resembling Jesus, who was crucified by his community that didn't believe him as the Messiah, while Jesus was innocent himself, Santiago is also suggested as an innocent man whose death was driven by the collective onlooking of his community members that didn't bother to stop the murder. Through the biblical allusion, the author implicitly criticizes the community for collectively lacking responsibility and their onlooking attitude on Santiago's death. We heard the shouting, but we thought it was part of the bishop's festival. This line shows an irony of the religious ritual. Although the religious ritual takes up a significant proportion of people's life in the novel, it blinds people from seeing the truth, as how Bishop's Festival blinds Santiago's neighbor from knowing that the murder has just happened 20 paces from their door. Through irony, the author points out the emptiness of religious rituals relative to its perceived importance, suggesting that religion is not a reliable belief system that should necessarily lead us to truth.
The meticulous description of the Vicario twins murdering Santiago highlights their act with violence and brutality. This scene contrasts with the good nature of the twins previously established in the beginning of the novel, such as in the first chapter, they were hard-looking, but of a good sort, on page 15. The deteriorated innocence of two twins suggests how the set of piled-up expectations for machismo, accepted by the majority of social members, can have detrimental effects on solitary individuals, such as Vicarios and Santiago.
In page 121, as Santiago passed by the table, he smiled. Despite the fact that Santiago was going to die soon, he copes with his confusion and anxiety by smiling as a way to prepare for the potential outcomes. It may also be suggesting the absurdity of the situation, as a smile may be a sign of mockery, which further supports Santiago's innocence.